Okay, welcome everyone. We're just going to give everyone a couple of seconds to join. You can either put your cameras on or you can choose not to. We welcome you to if you would like to. Okay, well, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Rosenfeld. It's so nice to see so many of our current and alumni students back in the house tonight. My work at Northern Westchester Hospital, and I oversee a program called the President's Junior Leadership Council program. I am very excited to bring this program to you as part of a Northwell Health program in coordination with the JLC program at Cohen's Children's Medical Center, which is also part of Northwell Health. And as an alumni event, we welcome all of you back to continue your education with us. We have with us a couple of residency directors, which are part of Northwell. We have Dr. Gary Stallings, who is the residency director at Northern Westchester Hospital, which is a new upcoming program, which we're very excited about. He is also an associate professor of medicine at the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, Northwell Health. We have Dr. Rebecca Collins, who is the program director of the Phelps Family Medicine Residency Director Program. And we have several medical residents with us. And I have 4 names. If I miss any of you, please, I welcome you to unmute and introduce yourself. But we have Frank Minio, who's a 2nd-year resident. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Saka Hawk, who is a 2nd-year resident. Jade Zhao, who is a 3rd-year resident. And Jody Ann Carlson, who is a 2nd-year resident. So welcome all of you. Do we have any other residents who would like to introduce themselves? Go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, can hear you now.
I'm Natalie Bushlack. I'm a PGY 3 and happy to join you guys.
Thank you very much for introducing yourself. And we have 2 student moderators with us from our JLC and PGLC programs. They are high school students, and we are very, very thrilled that they're willing to moderate this program tonight. We have Chloe and Kenna. So I'm going to turn this over to them in a second, and they're going to be leading this program. A couple of other last minute things. We try to incorporate as many questions as were pre-submitted as possible. If any questions pop up, please feel free to put them in the chat. We are moderating them. If at the end you are willing, and I really hope you're all willing, there will be a survey that automatically pops up on your screen that just lets us know what you thought about the program, what else you'd like to see. It's very short, I promise. It's only 5 questions. Please, when the Zoom closes, please stay to fill out that survey. And without further ado, Chloe and Kenna, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining us today. Our first question for both the directors and the residents is, what is something that's important to know about medical residency programs that isn't commonly discussed, particularly at the high school or undergraduate levels?
I think it really just depends, because I feel like you guys probably have like a lot of different exposures to medicine from students, residents, and other doctors. But I think the biggest thing that I was always told time and time again that I finally realized in medicine is that you go into medicine for the people and the love of the art, not for the money, because you don't make that much money when you're first starting out. And actually the first years of medical school, you're actually paying someone to teach you. And then after that, you are working such long hours, and what really keeps you going is what brought you to medicine in the first place. And if that's money, then I suggest you guys go into finance.
Something else that I learned at the end of medical school and also throughout residency was documentation is very important. So in addition to seeing patients, speaking with patients and managing their care, it's also important that you do the other half, which is the paperwork. You have to also document your conversation with the patients, why certain decisions were made, how they were made with the patients. And this is something that I learned and will continue learning.
On my side of things, I think the biggest thing is when I was in high school, I didn't realize how much of a team sport it actually is. You really are communicating with a bunch of different physicians, nurses, etc., throughout your entire journey. So you really need to learn how to be able to advocate for your patients and to be able to just work together in the sandbox, essentially.
I think one of the most important advice that I got in my career in college, when I knew I wanted to go into medicine, but I was seeing my friends who were in social work doing real change, going out into the community, doing surveys, working all over, and I was studying organic chemistry and getting a bit dejected, was that this is a long haul. And getting into residencies, like I knew about med school, I didn't know how many years residency would be, or that it's different for different specialties. But one of the advice that my college counselor gave me was that the more education you have, the more options you have. So yes, Becca, you could leave and change your major and be a social worker and be working in the community right now. But the wealth of opportunities that you will have in medicine and the leadership training that you will get will be much different than just an undergrad degree and kind of stopping now. So it is a long haul. I think it's totally worth it, but just knowing that kind of you kind of have to be okay with delayed gratification, where finally you are sitting down on your own, knee to knee, with a patient and kind of making your decisions independently.
And I like to kind of think of, because I was the dean at a med school until recently, or one of the deans, not the dean, that's a different job, at one of the med schools until like 8 months ago. The students get really hung up on these little details about what's the best program and what's going to position me the best to be thing. And the reality is, unless you want to be like the Surgeon General, you can pretty much go wherever you want, and there are a wealth of great programs that will train you to be a really good doctor in whatever field you're going to be in. So I heavily push students to think about what do they want out of where they're going to train. Like, do you want to be with indigent population? Do you want to be with underserved? Do you want to be in the inner city? Do you want to be in the suburbs? Or rural? Like, what do you want? Because in all different settings, you can get a great education and be a great doctor and do great things in an environment that really works for you. And so the names and little bitty things people get caught up on just aren't that big of a deal in the end. It's better off to figure out, what do I want? What will serve me the best so I can fit in best in that long training, because it's long and hard no matter what you go into, it just is. But it's awesome if you really like it, and you can have a great time as long as you lean into the what fits me so I can best pair with the training I'm going to get.
I think it's important to realize that your path in medicine and your career is not going to look like those around you. And so you can change your career and take a 90-degree turn in it and still make it work. My path in medicine looks entirely different from Jody's path, but we're still at the same place, and we're still providing care to patients that we enjoy seeing.
My question for the directors and the students is that what should you look for when searching for residency programs? And to the students, what are the major factors in your decision to pick your current program?
So I picked my residency program based on two major factors. One was location, and the second one was the quality of the teaching. So I'm originally from Queens, from around the area, about 1 hour away, and I wanted to be close to my family and my close friends who are here. I also wanted to be able to escape to familiar places if I wanted to revisit a place because it popped up in memory lane, or I wanted to seek a place of comfort. I wanted to go to somewhere that I've been to since I was young. And And the location also had to have new places for me to explore to keep me excited. So, oh, this town over here, only 5 minutes away, has a new coffee shop with new artwork, and I want to see that so that it's easily accessible to me. So location was very important to me. And the second thing was the quality of the teaching. I remember when I came here my interview day, we took a tour of the hospital, of the clinic. And when we were in clinic, we have this faculty doctor who was giving a moment in the clinic sessions, and she invited everyone who was part of the interview team to come in, join us, and she would teach us just as she taught the other residents and the people around. And I just felt like it was such a collaborative learning environment. It felt very warm, and that was something that stuck with me long afterwards and had me rank the program much higher, like at the top.
I just wanted to say in general, though, when you are looking at residencies, at least something that helped me was kind of just sort of like sitting by yourself and deciding like what it is you want to see like in your ideal program for whatever you want to, whatever field you choose to pursue. And so for me, like once I knew, okay, like family medicine was it, like Jade, location was definitely like a part of it. I too am from Queens. But besides that, like applying family medicine, I knew I wanted like an unopposed program, which basically just means that you want to be somewhere where like you're the main resident, you know, you're not really like kind of butting shoulders and having to fight with anyone to see procedures or to do things because you are the resident that's there. And then I also kind of knew somewhat coming in that I also liked women's health. So I wanted a program that like had a lot of like OBGYN type of things, hence why I'm here. So, it really is up to you to sort of like do your homework a little bit and kind of figure out like, what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? All that stuff.
And then for our next question, we're asking about what is the typical culture of residency programs, if they lean more collaborative or competitive?
I think touching upon what Frank said, medicine is a team sport, and you'll realize that so much when you start medical school, because you really depend on your other colleagues to study with, because you're going to be studying for like 10, 12-hour days, and then you're on a clinical rotation where you're not only working with the medical student, but the residents, also attendings and other ancillary staff like medical assistants and nurses. It's definitely a team sport, and you have to know, how to set your boundaries, but also how to give a little bit. So you have to learn how to play well, because if you don't, then you lose out on opportunities and you potentially can burn bridges. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be like outgoing and extroverted. There are plenty of like introverted people who actually have like some of the best like bedside manner with patients, but you definitely have to be able to work with other people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Most of the competitive nature, I feel like, is more in medical school, because a lot of your candidacy for what residencies you want to go into are based off of scores and how you perform. And at that time, you're being compared sort of with your classmates. And even in that situation, I still felt at my school, it was very collaborative and there wasn't much of a competitive nature, but that's where it's mostly seen. Once you get to residency itself, I feel like we all depend on each other to pick each other up after a long day. If any one of us had a poor encounter with or outcome with a patient, to be able to sort of just lean on each other and pick each other up. So we're almost, all kind of in this together, and basically, like I said, a team sport.
I look at this, there's a different competitive construct between med school and residency, and I am an FM, where the people here are usually pretty cozy. Med school, there's this feeling of like a zero-sum game. Well, I have to get the best grade possible, the best score possible. See question in the chat. To get to the best place possible. It's always about this zero sum of getting the best, which is kind of counterproductive, but I understand why students feel that way. And that gives that competitive feel. When you're in a residency, it's not usually a competition between residents because you're all in this together trying to get through the same stuff, and it doesn't have that zero-sum feel. But there are programs that are not as nice as others, and sometimes different fields have a tendency towards different things. So medicine, FM, psychiatry, and peds tend, but are not always, a little nicer and easier to work with. And then when you get into more procedural, longer fields, they're often harder to get into, and the culture can be a little different. But even within that, there can be, neurosurgery programs that are really supportive and warm and great. So I like to think of when you look at the program you're going to train in or want to apply for, you need to try to find a way to figure out, like, are the residents there happy? Are they totally burnt out and feel like they're just the bottom of the barrel? Or like, so you can figure out, I'm going to be living in this program for 3 to 6+ years. I want to be happy in it. And then there are concessions to make about, I want, like, for me, I couples matched with my wife because she's dermatology, I'm medicine, and derm is much harder to get into than medicine. So I applied all over the place because my main goal was to be near my wife. So I was going to be okay with managing and do not as great a program for fit with me, because the main thing was I'm going to live in the same place as my wife.
Mm-hmm.
If that helps.
I would second to what Dr. Stalling said, and getting a feel of the culture of every program, because if you have decided your specialty, and not all medical students are for sure, sometimes med students apply to a couple different specialties in the match, but most people have kind of narrowed it down to one specialty. Going to those programs, if you're able to do a sub-I, is a great idea. That's the best way to pick up on a culture. But you can also kind of tell from your interview day for residency what's important. So for our recruitment and our residency, we've identified those characteristics that we've found most successful for our program and caring for our community. So we're going to ask you about that. And more competitive specialties, there definitely are kind of norms where primary care is, like Dr. Stelling said, a little more team-based, whereas some of the procedural-based specialties, there still are, it's a little more competitive as folks are competing for fellowships and further training as they've got years and years ahead of them. So visiting that program, thinking about what questions they're asking you, because that will reflect what's important to them, is kind of the best way to know. But every program will be different as far as what they see most valuable in the residents.
Our next question is, how do the responsibilities or duties as a resident change and progress over time?
So our residency program is 3 years long. So after you graduate medical school, you're an intern during the first year. And the first half of the intern year, you're just adjusting. You're adjusting to a new system. There are a lot of things you have to learn. You have to learn how to use, like, the electronic medical system on the computer and software. You have to learn how clinic flows, how the hospital flows. And then the second half of the year, that's when you start building on what you know and what you're familiar with, and you learn how things are. You also have mentorship available during your intern year from the second and third year residents. And when it's your turn to be the second year resident, you're now considered a senior. You're more comfortable with the system. You have an idea of what you're doing. You're still learning new things every day, but you're also mentoring and helping the interns, the first years, navigate this whole system, because it's still new to them, especially the first half of the year. And then when you're a third year, I feel like it's like a second year, but on steroids. You know what you're doing. Now you're able to tackle on more, and you're also able to collaborate with faculty. You're able to collaborate with leadership, and you act a little bit more independent. You seek out additional opportunities, learning opportunities, so that you can get more practice in whatever you do want to specialize in after you graduate. And then you also do what you can to support, like, the residency program for the next incoming classes for the next few years.
Yeah, to sort of build on that, basically each year the expectations of what you can do sort of advance. So as an intern, when you're seeing your patients in the office, you have to discuss them with the senior attending that you're assigned to for that day, and they'll go back with you to chat with the patient. And that's pretty much the expectation for every patient. By the time you get to your second year, you have to discuss every patient while they're still there, but the attending might not go back into the room with you if they feel that you're able to address everything after discussing it with them. And by the time you're in your third year, you are more or less seeing the patients on your own and consulting your attendings to discuss the patients by the end of your shift. And of course, with each year, you end up having more patients on your panel. In your intern year, you tend to have only 2 or 3 per half day, and you get about an hour to be able to, spend with them. By the time you get to your third year, that's shrunk all the way down to 15 minutes or 30 minutes for depending on the type of visit. So it definitely progresses and you get more responsibilities. It's not all dumped on your shoulders from day one of intern year. It's sort of a gradual progression.
I just also wanted to say that, like, with the progression, just to add on to what Jade and Frank said, it's also important that, like, you're in the midst of all this, you're still learning. And like, as you go through your whole thing, you're still learning, and everyone knows that. So it's like, just to not make it seem like you're suddenly a third year and then everyone's like, okay, you know everything now, go and save the world. Like, you're still learning. And I imagine as an attending, you're still learning. So it's like, there's always room for learning and everything. No one expects you to sort of like be on your own and be like Superman or Superwoman or whatever, just because you've, got a couple of years under your belt. You always will need help, and help is available. So just also put that in there.
There are two medicine and family medicine, internal medicine and family medicine are very similar. And so what my residents, if I had them, would say it's about the same. There are 2 other ways this works. Is you can do a prelim year, which is somebody who's going into dermatology, radiology, and those fields. They do an intern year just like an FM or IM resident would do for 1 year of medicine. And then they change fields completely and they start in their secondary field. So if they're doing, like my wife did dermatology, she did 1 year with me as an intern, showed me up a lot, it's kind of her thing. And then she stopped doing medicine and did dermatology and resets as a first year dermatology resident, but it's her second year. The other variant is if you're in a procedural field that's like 5 or 6 years long, they have the same intern progression piece, but in your last year, you're the chief and you are basically a junior attending. You have to run the cases, you have to teach the other surgery resident how to do it. And it's a different structure where it's like you're everything except an attending for that entire year. You run the cases, they are your cases. It's intense, but you need that for that field to be ready to be your own attending and procedural field leader. So the basic concept is the same, but those are 2 variants if you're not interested in the primary care. Like PEDS is the same thing as FM and IM for that.
Thank you. So our last question, some of you have touched on this already, but if you could, what advice would you offer to current undergraduates or high schoolers who are interested in going into medical school and eventually practicing medicine?
I'd strongly recommend getting as many chances to expose yourself in medicine now as you can. Whether that's once you hit 18 years old, you can maybe work as an EMT or volunteer at hospitals. Eventually, there are positions called scribes that you could sign up for if you want, where you essentially work with physicians or advanced practicing practitioners like nurse practitioners or physician assistants, and document everything that happens so you can get the experience of being with patients and seeing what being in medicine is really like. Because if you don't get that experience ahead of time, you might not really know what you're getting yourself into, as well as a lot of medical schools and residencies look to see that you've really gotten a good exposure to the medical world.
And then on top of that, so I'm a non-traditional applicant, which means that I took time off in between, undergrad and getting into medical school, I would say just like enjoy the journey and really just like make sure this is the right choice for you. Not only like what Frank was saying, like getting that clinical exposure, but also getting exposure in other fields and interests that you might have. Because like Dr. Collins was saying, it's a long journey. It's like 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and then if you're lucky, you're in a shorter term residency. Sometimes some residencies are like 5+, and then you do fellowship. So don't rush the process, and keep learning and ask people who like you guys are here now, like the mentors or other people you cross in your career path, like how did you get there and what did you like about your job? Because that will not only help you in your like medical career, but also just help you just understand who you are and like what you enjoy.
I would also add that don't get discouraged. I talk to a lot of young people who think like, oh my gosh, how could I ever afford to go to medical school? It is a big expense, but there are lots of ways to pay for it. There are many, many, many scholarships to help with med school expenses and for paying loans afterwards. And graduating as a physician, you will always make a healthy wage, no matter where you are. It puts you heads above. So sometimes I'll hear often like, well, maybe I'll just be a PA. It's quicker, it's cheaper, and I'll get to do what I want to do. But I would really encourage you to take a moment and think about if you really want to kind of be the leader of the care team, that there are many ways to afford med school, and there's a lot of loan forgiveness out there that you can easily go into this even without a strong financial footing and get your loans paid for and still make a very healthy salary. So I never want people to be discouraged by the cost or time. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
There's a lot of validity in people saying you need to do a lot of medical experience on your way. And I agree that it is important to have experience to know what it's like in that kind of a field. I think it's equally important to really explore whatever makes you, you. I mean, it's so easy to get this one-track mind. I must do pre-med. I must do, like, my roommate at med school was an English major. My program director was a classics major. Like, okay, you can do all kinds of things and still get the requisites you need, but you want to make sure you do things that are true to you. So if volunteering is important to you, or tutoring is important to you, or teaching, kids how to do sport, like, great. Do things that make you happy, that show that you are more than just someone who's good in class, because that's what we're going to look for, and that helps you fit somewhere anyway. So you should do those things that are medically relevant because you need that experience to understand the job you're going to spend the next many years getting ready for. But being able to be unique in your own way, and I really like cooking. I'm like, great, rock cooking club and do all the cooking things you can. And then when you get in an interview, you can say, time about yourself. Oh, I really like cooking. And like, oh yeah, great, you like cooking. And then you can explain, like, no, you don't understand. Like, I am legit all in cooking. And then like, wow, that's amazing that you have this unique skill that's cool for you. And it'll pay dividends later when you're stressed as a resident or as attending. You have this thing that you've developed over time. That's like your happy place, which is good for you.
Our next question is directed towards Dr. Collins. Can you give a brief overview of what it's like to apply to residency programs, and what does the process entail for both students and hospitals?
Yeah, so during medical school, you'll get a lot of information on how this process works. They kind of walk you through once you're in medical school, but there is a program called ERAS, which is kind of similar to like Common App for colleges. And you'll research your programs that you want to send your application to, and it goes electronically to the programs. And then, there's all these kind of deadlines. You do that like at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall of your 4th year of medical school. And then the residency programs, we receive all these thousands of interviews, of applications. And we start combing through who we think meet some of the criteria that are important for us. And we then invite those applicants for interviews. And then we we narrow that list of interviews for who we're going to rank. We have something called a rank list where it's, you know, maybe all the residents that we would like to come to our program. And medical students put in their rank list. So of all the places they've interviewed, they rank their program. Like, I'd like to go to, you know, Phelps first, Columbia second, Montefiore third, all the way down. And then a computer kind of matches what the students' choices are with the residents. So the student's choice always trumps residency program. So the highest program on the students list, if they are towards the top and that program hasn't filled their slots yet, that's who the student matches with. We have that list comes out and we have a celebration for who matches with us. That's kind of the process.
Thank you.
Sure.
And this next question is going to be directed towards the students. What initially developed your interest in pursuing a residency program?
Are you asking like why we chose both, why we chose family medicine?
This one is more for why you chose to go on the MD path.
Like going to med school in general?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll start. For me, like my initial sort of just, I guess, like entrance into medicine in general was through my mom, because my mom's a nurse. And then after, when I was in high school, I actually had an opportunity to like go through a pipeline program in high school, and that really opened my eyes to like, oh, like these are the many different fields that you can go into if you go into medicine. And so we were speaking earlier about how different our paths were. I ended up going to like a BSMD program, which basically like my college and med school was kind of like all in one. So taking that path, then it's like I was always sort of surrounded, even from college days, was always surrounded by like something medical. And then family medicine is honestly something I fell into after just speaking to one of the advisors at my school, because after going through my third year rotations, I was like, I don't know what to do. I love everything. So how can I like sort of like marry all of these into one? And so just going through my family medicine rotation and everything like that kind of helped me to solidify my choice and like why I'm here now. But from the beginning, I guess like my initial spark was honestly just my mom, and then just like building on that and like kind of seeing what it was all about for myself. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, I'll quickly go. So I was a certified job hopper, I would say. I really enjoyed everything. I was like a medical assistant. I worked for the VA. I worked for organ donation. But I wanted to help my community, but I didn't know how. And honestly, I didn't think I was smart enough or good enough for medical school. So it took a few years to finally convince myself, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I love social work, but you can impact communities more being a physician. So eventually I applied, and then I got in, and then now I'm here. And I love family medicine because I'm able to work with all the different populations, from kids to the elderly.
I had no idea I was going to end up in medicine, but when I was I'm the first one in my family to go to college and then medical school. But growing up, I was always like the advocate for my family. I always read my family speaks Chinese, my parents speak Chinese only, and I would always be the one interpreting their mail, filling out forms for them. When we were in a housing crisis, I was only 8 years old, and I would walk around different neighborhoods asking what apartments were available for rent. I would go to renting offices at the age of 8 and try to look over the forms to fill them out. And just over the years, just by taking care of my parents, my family, I really got a sense of fulfillment when I see that I'm able to do something to improve the lives of other people. And then I fell in love with the science when I was in high school. So I went to college. That grew towards more medicine because I wanted to marry science into an art where I can actually work one-on-one with people and kind of guide them through a very complex system that we have in our society, whether that's healthcare whether that's like social care. And I wanted to be a leader in that. So that's why I chose medicine. And in primary care, you see all of that. The patients come to you. You are the first person that they come to, that they talk to. And with the training and the experience and the background that you get from medical school and especially residency, you're able to guide them towards what's needed to improve their health and their life. Because medicine is not just your physical health, it's also, you have all these other factors in your life that affect how well you are able to maintain and treat your health.
Our next question is for the directors. So what do you look for in candidates who apply to residency programs?
So we had a brainstorming session with our recruitment committee, and we kind of refresh this every few years on what qualities we're looking for, and then we kind of design our interview questions from that. So characteristics that we found really successful are commitment to the underserved. We take care of a primarily Latinx population in Sleepy Hollow. We also see resiliency and evidence of that in applicants' lives as a really great characteristic. Clinical curiosity and some commitment to further exploring the social determinants of health has been one. And then kind of enthusiasm and excitement for the work and the learning process. Those are kind of our top characteristics that we look for.
Yeah, so for me, it's interesting. So I was an associate program director somewhere else for a handful of years before I came here. So here I haven't interviewed anyone yet because we're brand new. So it's a tough answer for that. But where I've been before, there's this big part of fit. And each program, like Dr. Collins, went through the things that are important for her program. And the resiliency is always something people look for. We want to see someone that can do well academically and manage the rest of life, because life doesn't care that you're a doctor. It's going to do its thing no matter what, and you have to be able to manage all that stuff. Thus the cooking thing I referenced before. Most of it comes about fit. Like, what does the program you're looking at really want? Do they value research? If they really are a big research place, they're going to want to see that you have research. If they really look at the team-based process of delivering care, they're going to heavily look at people that have the team skills that make it work. It really becomes this whole, what do you want? What do we want? Let's see if we have the same things, and then we can, we can date as a program for 3 years, and then you can go be a doctor elsewhere. But it's kind of unique for each program.
Thank you. Our next question is for the residents. What have you gained most from your experiences as a medical resident?
I think I have gained a lot of leadership skills and teaching skills because we have to be able to learn to work in different team environments, work with different team members. So you really learn how to become a leader. And then when you are speaking with patients or even with other residents, you're learning and teaching at the same time. The best way to learn is to teach. So when you're working with other people, you're especially with the people when you work with patients, you want to meet them where they are. So you want to know what they understand first, and then you want to break down the information that you know into a language that they understand, so that they're able to learn from you and incorporate what they can into their life. And when you're working with other residents on your team, you're trying to do the same thing too. Everyone's contributing, everyone is learning. You're trying to match each other so that you can all be on the same page and grow from there. So you really do learn a lot about how you learn and how you teach when you're in residency.
I think for myself, the biggest thing that I've gotten out of residency so far is a deeper understanding of what my limits are and how they're a lot broader than I initially thought they were. There are definitely times where we have to be on call for 24 hours or for a longer period of time. And there are gonna be times where you're gonna be very sleep deprived and have to make, medical decisions. And I always thought, oh, I couldn't do that on, no sleep. And I was able to realize that I did not actually have that boundary and was able to grow and learn in that situation. And I get those little moments all the time in residency where things that I thought I couldn't do, I can in fact do and will do.
Yeah, to harp on that, it's so true. Like that's why I think one of the biggest things that both program directors look for is resilience, because you don't realize how far you're like pushed to the edge. There's always a safety net, but like in residency, like you're working long hours, you're taking care of patients, you're constantly learning and teaching other people that yeah, it's pretty crazy how much when you look back in a year or even in a month, like how much you've learned and how much you've grown. And then you realize like, wow, medicine is for you because you wake up every day and you keep going in, and you actually, when you meet your patients and you're able to like change their lives through medication management or even through conversations, that's how you knew you made the right choice.
I think something that I've learned that's become more important to me over residency, maybe not the most important thing that I've learned, but is my own wellness and taking care of that. So that, sometimes we work 80 hours a week. That's double the regular work week. And so it's hard to take care of others when you're not feeling well. And so finding those things that help you keep going, be it like a partner, a pet, a plant sometimes too. And so keeping that in mind and trying to keep sane. I think something Jade said resonated with me. You meet your patients where they're at. And so you can go crazy trying to get your patients to do things like exercise or eat healthy. But you can't do it to a point where you lose sleep over it. You really have to, keep work and, home for getting better and getting some sleep.
Thank you. Our next question is for the directors. What undergraduate majors tend to be the best for students looking to get into residency?
I was waiting for that question. It doesn't matter at all. You can do whatever you want, have a great time. It's important that whatever you decide to do works for you. Like you could be we have one of the students from a year or two ago was a music major in classical piano. The intensivist upstairs has a degree from NYU in music theory in metal. So he has a metal guitarist degree and he's a pulmonary intensivist. Like it doesn't matter. You just have to do well in it, like it, and then check all the boxes to apply to med school.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You always want to have a plan B. And so if all you do is study science and you don't like science, there are people who get to medical school who think, oh God, this is not what I thought it was. I'm just doing something else. Or same with practice, right? So do what makes you happy in life in general. And if medicine is part of that, great. But if you get there circuitously, I think it just brings more to your practice. So absolutely do what makes you happy. And it's fun to bring all the gifts of all the different paths that people have taken here together to your care team.
Thank you. Our next question is for the residents, and it is, are you currently involved in any clinical research? And did you participate in any undergraduate research?
I did research in undergrad because I was part of a program like science leaders program, which was geared towards like introducing more women into the STEM fields. Honestly, I don't remember what they were. It was like bench research and it's been like over 10 years ago. But I felt that what really made me stand out in my medical school application was another program I did that focused on like social determinants of health and community action, which is what my focus is on here in residency, which is community medicine. So it really doesn't matter like what research you do as long as you're doing things that interest you. So I did a lot more like public health, community medicine research in college, some in med school, and then now I'm continuing in residency because that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, in our residency, we do get the experience of doing clinical research. We all get exposure to looking at quality improvements, things like screening for depression in a year, the percentage of our patients that have good blood pressure control, things like that, and researching and theorizing ways that we can improve that. Or we also get chances to do research looking at our own personal interventions that might just improve general health quality in general. And as for myself in undergrad, I did get a pretty good exposure to research. My college, for all the science majors, one of our requirements was to do a capstone research project, and I did mine in addiction studies, looking at some behavioral interventions on rats, and it was definitely a great experience. And if anyone is interested in that sort of research, I think it's a great opportunity.
I spent 3 years doing research after graduating from undergrad and before going to medical school. So in undergrad, I did bench work, working with radioactive DNA. And then in the 3 years after graduating and before medical school, I worked in a mouse lab where I bred mice and injected their livers with stem cells to study hepatitis and other liver infectious diseases. And towards the end of the 3 years, I was also able to work on a project with Memorial Sloan Kettering, where we received cancer cells from patients that would try to grow their tumors in the mice that we would humanize with the stem cells and see if we could give a personal individualized treatment to each type of to the cancer specific to that person and predict how well they would respond to that treatment. So that was something that was really interesting, really cool. There was no patient interaction unless you count their tumor cells.
Thank you. This question is for the residents again. How do you balance your medical residency with your personal life?
I think we're still trying to figure that out. We've learned that, medicine doesn't define us. Like, it's a huge part of our life, but it doesn't define us. And I think, like Dr. Stalling was saying, you really need to figure out your hobbies. For me, it's plants and like visiting coffee shops and spending time with family, and then now snowboarding. But I live vicariously through my fiance. I'll go once in a while for every 10 times he goes. But yeah, we're just still, it's really a balance, and some days are better than others, just depending on the rotation.
Yeah, I think it's just, I guess, like the age old, all about time management. And sometimes, honestly, you just say, who needs sleep anyway? You go out and you do whatever. So, I mean, as Soka said, sometimes like you're more balanced than others. And some days you kind of throw away one thing to focus on some other things. But, as long as you're happy in the end.
And caffeine helps. Coffee, tea, whichever.
So buy a lot of socks and underwear. That way you do laundry less often.
Thank you. So for the next portion, for the minutes we have left, we're going to move on to the Q&A. So if Adriana wants to unmute and ask their question.
Sure. Hello. This question is geared a little bit more towards the medical students. I guess the medical student mindset. So one of the big changes that's kind of been shaking my class is the change of step 1 to pass fail. And we were just wondering if you guys have noticed a shift in what residency programs might look for, since a lot of these students no longer have scores applying into residency, or will no longer have scores.
So we always, at least for our program and for primary care in general, it was always whether you passed or not necessarily how high you were. Different specialties will look at that. But for us, not much of a change for primary care. Want to make sure you pass and keep it going.
Yeah, I've been at a lot of some national conferences discussing this, and it's kind of up in the air. We're trying to figure out what makes the most sense. We want the best fit for people for us, and it's trying to figure out how do you manage when like one of the new medicine programs at Northville got like 2,000 something applicants for, I think he has 6 spots. And so it's trying to figure out how can I equitably filter through that ratio of 6 to 2,000. And he interviewed, I think, 200 people, which is, he said it was overkill, but it's like, I'm trying to figure it out. So I'd have a better answer for you in a few years, but right now it's still trying to get the fit.
Yeah, I think it's, we're still sort of experiencing the beginnings of that change because they only went to pass fail, I believe 2 years ago. So that is taking normally towards the end of your second year of medical school. So those medical students are only just now applying for residency. So, this is pretty much the first year that we're starting to see the effects of that. I think in a few years, we'll be able to see a bit more about what other markers certain programs tend to use to develop, to readjust their criteria for selection.
Next,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Naomi Peck. If you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. This is also for the residents. I was just wondering if there's something that surprised you or caught you off guard about residency, and if there's anything that you wish you knew before entering residency that could have prepared you better for it.
I guess for me, so when you're on rotation and then you're working at your residence and they're working so hard and they're not eating their lunch because they have like all these consults and notes to do, that's gonna be you. And that surprised me because day one of residency, like you are the doctor, you're making these medical decisions. You can ask your senior resident and you're attending, but like try to absorb as much as you can on rotation, because that will just make the transition into residency a little bit more smoother. It's still gonna be a really steep hill, but it won't be as rough if you really put in the effort now. Like, when they're calling those consults, see how they call them. When they're writing the notes, see how they write them. When they're doing their like physical exam, ask for them to show you, because the more you practice in medical school, the slightly easier it will be in residency when you're the doctor that walks through that door.
To kind of add on to what Soka said, I think something that kind of surprised me though is like, in addition to like, yes, like you have a lot of work to do, but I guess I was surprised at how supported you are throughout that, because it's like, yeah, you are the doctor day one. But again, I guess this also goes back to what we were saying about like the program that you go into, but at least like for our program, I feel like you're the doctor from day one and you have a lot of responsibility day one, but then you have a lot of support day one. So it's like very scary just coming in, but it's like there are people there by your side. You're not kind of just, thrown over the boat and they're like, okay, swim back to shore. Like there's help there.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. So if Sydney wants to unmute.
Thank you so much. This is a different question from what I wrote in the chat for the residency program directors. I mentioned that undergrads can major in anything to get into med school. Is that the same if you want to pursue an MD, PhD, or do you think it's different?
I don't think it matters. Because the PhD part's a little different. That's your research focus. So for the med school side, you just have to, whatever you're interested in is great. I've seen engineers, like you name a degree, I've probably seen it as someone who's gone through med school. The PhD is a companion piece, but it's not linked like that way. It's if you want to do an MD, PhD at the same time, and your program that offers that and offers a PhD in something that you're interested in. But as far as majors are concerned, it's just got to be something you want to do that works for you. But really, it's kind of carte blanche. Dr. Collins.
Yeah, I also think if I'm not mistaken, you do the MD and PhD before you apply to residency. So that part would be done. So then you would maybe look for residency programs that are a little more research based, since you have that expertise. But to be honest, very rare do I see an MD PhD candidate come through for family medicine.
That just remind me, so we have MD PhD students at New York Med where I was at before here, and usually it's complete third year of med school that whatever your clinical first major clinicals are, then you get time off to finish your PhD.
Yeah.
Then you do your like application fourth year construct, unless you did PhD first and then did your MD, and then it's just normal med school with a PhD beforehand. But those students that have a PhD typically are research focused, which makes sense. And they tend to go to a program that is big on research. And those programs look for people that have PhDs, so it lines up real nice.
Thank you so much for everyone for joining. We were trying to keep it really punctual tonight, to really be mindful of everybody's time, let those residents sleep. So thank you so much. Oh, and Dr. Stallings, he went like, yes, Dr. Stallings too.
Residents get to sleep. I don't understand what's going on with them over there. You need to talk.
Well, so thank you everyone for joining. As a reminder, there's a brief survey that's going to pop up automatically on your screen. Please, please, please fill it out so you can have more programs like this. And if we didn't get to any of your questions, you can also put them in the survey and I'll be sure to get them directed to the proper channels to try to get it answered for you. So thank you and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Great job, presenters and moderators. Thank you.
Thanks all. Good luck.
Thanks, everybody.